Bum 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 bum. The Peter Dislike Show. Bum 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 bum. In a past video, I think I talked about the rarity of all the different strategic metals and how much they're worth, and I did a kind of a market cap of metals, and I showed how bismuth and tellurium were so undervalued based on how much there is times the price, right? The market cap of bismuth is a tiny fraction of that of gold or even that of copper. You compare it to any other element, it was a tiny market cap. Even compared to some of the really, really rare elements like radium or some of the transuranic elements, it was still a tiny market cap, right? Because those things have a high price going for them, right? Anyways, I thought I would also look at, based on historical comparison. So here we have aluminum. Now there's two prices actually. Alumina, which is the main ore of aluminum. It's mostly aluminum oxide, and aluminum. Now historically, these two prices didn't always move in tandem. So in 1900, alumina might have been cheap, but aluminum was a borderline precious metal because the electrolysis process for turning alumina into aluminum was still being developed. And so you can see aluminum was roughly 40 cents a pound, which sounds cheap, except you got to remember that was 4 silver dimes basically, right? Imagine having to pay 4 silver dimes today for a pound of aluminum. That would be like $7, $8, $9 a pound, right? So it was kind of borderline precious at this point in time. And nowadays, depending on how you look at it, right? If you expect energy to not always be so abundant, then aluminum metal is almost like storing energy, right? Not my number one choice for strategic metals because, yes, you might be able to store energy that way, but so do a lot of other elements that I'll get to in a second. Antimony is kind of overvalued at the moment, I would argue. It's almost as high as its peak in 2008 when all the commodities went up, right? Remember when platinum was $2,000 an ounce, palladium was $1,000 an ounce, the first time it had hit that since the Ford Motor Company debacle. Silver was $50 an ounce, right? So antimony is where it was when all of that was going on, right? This bauxite is another aluminum ore. Here's beryllium, which is the other part of the nuclear bombs that we dropped in Hiroshima. Right? We needed polonium and beryllium to generate neutrons, and right now it is at a 20-year high. And here's bismuth. Look at where it is right now. It is about as low as it was in the late 90s, early 2000s, when silver used to be $4 an ounce, right? It's just barely over where it was when Nixon ended the gold standard. Imagine being able to go to a bank and still buy gold at $35 an ounce, right? That's what bismuth is right now, right? Or you can compare it to the early part of the 20th century, right? It's only double as much as it was, right? World War II, I believe there was a period of time when bismuth was worth almost as much as silver, right? During World War II, when the other countries were running deficits against the U.S., we were accumulating a lot of silver. Silver was 25 cents an ounce. Here's boron at a multi-generation high here. Chromium, same story here. Coal. Cobalt is still on a 40-year trend, right? So it might be a good buy right now because in 1980, when silver was 50 an ounce, gold was peaked at 850, right? So you can still buy cobalt today at its 1980 high. Here's copper at a significant high compared to its 1980 high, right? I like to compare things to their 1980 highs, right? Practically every metal peaked out in 1980. Silver and bismuth are probably the only two metals that you can buy at below their 1980 highs, right? Bismuth considerably lower. Well, gallium, there's been a lot more technology for extracting it, so it's at a low right now. I would love gallium, except that there's really no good way to store it, right? Unless you can buy some kind of crystal that is a compound of gallium, right? Some kind of oxide or sulfide. Natural gas. Here's germanium, again, below its 1980 high, and not much higher than previously as well. Here's gold. I think we're all familiar with that story, right? Graphite, higher than its 1980 high, and not really a good, not really something that's easy to store anyhow. Here's indium, also below its 1980 high, and indium used to be a precious metal, and I think we're going to go back to that because the device you're watching this on probably has a bunch of indium that cannot easily be recycled, right? Iron, lead, lithium is way up there now. It's going to become even more popular with batteries, and I think more and more people are going to stop taking hard drugs and switch to lithium instead, right? The antidepressants and switch to a natural mineral instead of all those hard drugs. Here's manganese, which is also used in semiconductors and still lower than its 1980, or just a little bit higher than its 1980 peaks. Molybdenum. Last year, during the Russian invasion of Ukraine, nickel prices went to, I think, $100 a pound. But it's still considerably higher than its former 1980 peak, right? Niobium, still up there. Here's oil, just for reference, right? Nobody's going to buy oil and store it in their home. I'm kind of watching the price of palladium as we speak right now. Historically, palladium was kind of undervalued when it was anywhere from a third to a quarter of gold. So that's when I'll start paying attention to it. But even then, bismuth and silver are way more undervalued, right? So palladium's more of a side bet than anything else, even at that point in time. Phosphates, you can't really store that, but it's a good way to come, a good reference point. Here's platinum right here. Again, I'm kind of watching for when it's, let's see, when Nixon froze the gold window, platinum was 7 times gold, right? And then historically, the bottom was around 1 to 1. It's still a good buy, but why? Silver and bismuth are probably going to do better anyway. Right now, gold to silver is 80, 90, sometimes 100 to 1. And the gold to bismuth is unfathomably low right now, right? So, again, platinum is like a side bet to all of that, right? Potash, again, you're not going to store that, so it's just as a reference point of where it is. And I believe this is the Roaring 20s right here when that was the main commodity out there. Rhenium is a good buy right now. Right now you can buy rhenium at close to 1990 prices. There was a spike in between during the housing bubble. Selenium is similar to rhenium, except you're not going to easily store this, right? But it's a good reference point. Here's silver. So rhenium is probably more undervalued than silver. Of course, silver is way more liquid, so I'll let you think about that. Another one of my favorites is tantalum. It's a little bit higher than it was in 1990, but there's a lot more uses of tantalum than there were in 1990, obviously. Another one of my favorites, tellurium, right? Back to 1990 prices, and there's going to be a lot more uses of tellurium to come in the coming years because of our solar panel technology. Tin is quite overvalued at the moment, possibly because of all the supply chain shortages in regard to COVID, which is a shame. I really love making art out of tin. Some of these statues over here have some tin in them. This one is mostly tin with a small amount of bismuth just to make it a little bit more stable. These ones I made by melting some ammunition that was 94% bismuth and the rest of it being tin. So I hope to make more of that after tin corrects from its supply chain shortages. Titanium is back to where it was in the 80s, so that might be a good buy if you can store it right. It's very bulky for its price. Tungsten is at the high end, but it's got a bunch of applications to come with the semiconductors and the solar panels. Here's uranium. With all the talk about nuclear energy, it's still at its a little bit higher than its 1980 peak. Vanadium, it's a little bit higher than its 1980 peak, and it's very volatile in recent times. Here's zinc. It's a little bit less volatile, but considerably higher than its former peaks. Zirconium has just shot up since the financial crisis and stayed there, so probably not a good time to be buying. I'm guessing this is mostly conflict related. So if you have to look at historical charts, knowing nothing else you know about metals, it looks like bismuth, indium, tellurium, rhenium are probably the most undervalued by historical standards. And given what we looked at with market caps and all that, it's also undervalued over there. So not much can go wrong, right? Even silver is probably, if you compare it, if you use gold as your reference point, right? Silver is way undervalued. Platinum is somewhat undervalued, right? But silver is more liquid too, right? So I'll let you decide how to balance that. Personally, because I have enough time to take risk, I'm mostly going to balance it toward the strategic metals. If you want to take advantage of valuations, but you want liquidity, silver and platinum are probably your best bets.